it's interesting because a lot of our songs, we think of them just lyrics or songs or, songs, but most of them are couched in more prayer language than anything else.
That's fair.
Or they're in corrective. It's helping us believe something that's hard for us to believe. It's aligning our minds with truth. It's praying. It's not a spoken prayer. It's a sung prayer. Welcome to Keystone Conversations, our podcast on the topics and issues important to the Keystone family. Our hope is to give insight, wisdom, and resources as you press on to know and follow Jesus. I am Brent Mentor, the lead pastor of Keystone, and with me today is Jesse Antelman, our worship director, and also the infamous,
I love that,
Randy Woodbury. He is the executive pastor. And he's going to play not executive pastor role today. Usually when we're on the podcast together, he kind of gives leadership to the he kind of tries to round up everything and make sure we're going in the right direction. I'm going to try to do that today and allow him to give some input along the way. Because today we are going to be talking about worship. We're going to be talking about what happens in the musical space when we gather on Sunday morning. By the way, it's not just the musical. Worship is everything that happens with us, but we're going to be focusing kind of on the sections of not preaching the word. And it's a real reason. A few months back, Jesse, you came on staff, and we often use Keystone Conversations to welcome and introduce new staff to our family. And so gave introduction to you, and kind of at the end of that podcast, you and I started just talking about worship and the ways to engage worship and why we're passionate about it. Spoiler alert, most people know this, but a lot of new people might not. I was a worship pastor for 15 years, so we can talk shop together, and we started talking shop, and we realized we were going to go way longer, so we said, let's stop this, and we'll come back and have another conversation. It's not just introducing Jesse, but just as an opportunity to talk a little bit about how to think about worship, how to come to church, why we do certain things, and hopefully to kind of encourage and equip the people of God. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. And we have Randy here because I have a strong feeling me and Jesse could go off for hours and get into like really nerdy reasons. And
I'm here to keep it real.
Yeah. But also, I think the person listening can go, well, that's great for you, Brent and Jesse. Y'all can sit down at the piano, sit down at guitar, and you sing. And when you sing, it's pretty. And so, of course, you should worship. That's what But, Randy, I've never seen you have a guitar in your hand.
Correct.
I've seen you play Spotify. I've never seen you play an instrument.
I play to my strengths. We go. So I can hit push
Just for the record,
on an app.
Randy has a very vast knowledge of music. Sometimes we disagree on what's good. I think you should corner him in the lobby and just have him defend his love for Mariah Carey. Moving on. I threw him under the bus.
Wow. Gotta start hot. We know where to go, but here we go. We're going in.
All right, we're
guns blazing.
This is the reason I usually give input and don't lead the conversations. However, we are going to jump in today and really just try to have a conversation of how we can approach Sunday morning with not just I'm going to go listen to them sing, but I'm going to show up with my full heart, my full mind, my full strength, and worship the Lord. And so let's just kind of pull back before we talk about what's happened. Let's just give a perspective, Jesse. Like, give us some ideas of why do we worship? I can't think of anywhere else that you just show up and sing. I can think of where you show up and maybe. Watch. Yeah. But then you're not doing it as well. Right. You show up to watch people sing.
Yeah.
But the people of God have always been a singing people, and we show up and sing. Why is that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, there's a few verses that I was kind of prepared to share. So one was Psalm 100. It says, shout triumphantly to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Acknowledge that Yahweh is God. He has made us, and we are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name. For Yahweh is good, and his love is eternal. His faithfulness endures through all generations. So obviously, what's it telling us to do? It's telling us to sing, right? And then even like, I mean, it's all throughout the Psalms. I mean, the Psalms in itself is like a songbook. But like Psalm 95, it says, "Come, let us shout joyfully to the Lord, shout triumphantly to the rock of our salvation. Let's enter his presence with thanksgiving and shout triumphantly to him in song." So the clear just calls to sing. And then Psalm 96, "Sing a new song to the Lord, sing to the Lord all the earth, sing to Yahweh, praise his name, proclaim his salvation from day to day, declare his glory among the nations, his wonderful works among all people." Yeah. So it's just clear that there's something that happens when we sing, you know, and even just the truth in Hebrews that is telling us to not forget about meeting together. This idea that it's important for us to meet together, to hear from God's word. It's important for us to engage together. Yeah. In singing.
So that's great news for me and you, Jesse.
Yeah.
Like you can sing like an angel. In the day I could sing. Randy, like, no one's ever saying corporate principal Randy, like, is known by his singing. So when I hear "sing to the Lord," I'm like, let's go. Strike up the band. Let's let her rip. What's that feel like for you?
Well, it's interesting. I think this is one of the areas of, one, it's called the worship service on purpose.
Yeah.
That the entirety of that time together, when we're gathered, is worshipful. It's what you started with.
Yeah.
But depending on where you grew up and what context you grew up, what faith tradition, some would have said, hey, that's just the preamble till we get to the speaker.
Yeah.
And I think that was actually something I had to work on since coming into our context of, and we'll get to it later, I had never risen my hands in the church before. The music was ripping loud, and it was so disorienting. Yeah. Because my voice, I can't hear my voice. Now, let me just say that. The ability to not hear my voice, probably a good thing. Yeah. So that actually brings people into corporate worship better. And every so often, when like the power goes out, all of a sudden, oh, you can hear me. That's so the unifying nature of all of us together, whether you know the song or don't, that was something I had to train up and be very intentional about because I hadn't been for most of my life.
Yeah. And I mean, Jesse, you read the Old Testament. The New Testament leaves it there as well. Sing songs, hymns, and spiritual songs. Totally. Like some of the New Testament, like Philippians 2, the psalm where it says, "Don't consider equality," where Jesus didn't consider equality better. Let me pause and just quote it right. Where Christ did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but like that's the hymn of. It's the hymn of Philippians 2. Every scholar alive would say that was something that was sung in the church. Yeah. So, it's everywhere. I think,
or even like Ephesians 5. Like, you know, the come together psalms, hymns, spiritual songs.
Yeah. I feel like it's something that I mean, I don't have an answer for this, and I'm certainly not ready to defend it like this is it. But it occurs to me that one of the graces of God is that when you sing, multiple realities of your being is engaged. When we hear God's word preached, we hear it. Even when we, like, let's say take communion, like we taste it. But something's happening when we sing. We are engaging the lyric with our brain. We're participating with our body. And there's something unique about the context of musical worship that embodies an emotional reality. Like, you know, from a musical perspective, when we're singing a certain phrase and a minor chord is thrown underneath it, it builds the tension of this isn't resolved, right? Like, so it engages the emotions, it engages the mind, it engages the body. And all of us, as we're corporately gathered, are unified in that moment, in that time. Like, no one's singing about the resurrection of Christ. I'm like everyone's like, the whole room, whether that's 5 believers or 500 or 5,000, we're all moving in the same direction, kind of a unified reality.
Because you've both been in the context, could likely in a foreign field. There's 5 of you and the most beat down guitar you've ever seen, and it's one of the most holy moments you've probably had.
Totally.
There's both a uniqueness, like the power of a very large room worshiping is beautiful, but the intimacy of a small room is, I'd take it over. I mean,
I once led for a church in Juarez, Mexico. We were like building houses down there on a missions trip. And I learned like 3 songs or something, and I was singing, and like people were going nuts. It was like the people that were singing were just so engaged. I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Like, this is so cool. It's such a unique experience.
Yeah.
And it is a part. It is interesting if you think about it. It is the only part of the worship service where I get as a participant use verbal.
And you're participating.
Right. Because if you think of it, if you came from a Catholic background, you might, or a certain Lutheran, you might be, with liturgy where you're this call and response where it is our only part of our faith tradition where we get to verbally participate in the service.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because a lot of our songs, we think of them just lyrics or songs or, songs, but most of them are couched in more prayer language than anything else.
That's fair.
Or they're in corrective. It's helping us believe something that's hard for us to believe. It's aligning our minds with truth. It's praying. It's not a spoken prayer. It's a sung prayer, Oh man, we could keep
I've heard it said, I don't know who said it, but like I've heard it said before.
You should just take credit. Jesse once said.
I said this. It's like we sing when words when words aren't enough. It's like a different language for us, for our hearts to be able to just communicate with God. When speaking isn't enough, we sing the truth.
I'm gonna talk about how I've experienced that, and this is tender. But then I want to know about how you experienced this, Randy. Like the number of times, this is a musician, okay, that I don't know what to say to the Lord. So I just sit down with a guitar or piano and play it and just start singing over the top of it. I just sing my prayer. Like I feel like it's a loss for people who don't. I feel like I have a whole nother language to interact with God because, that's true with Spotify and my worship. Totally. I have a fresh worship playlist in Spotify that all the songs that God's burning inside of my heart are in right now, right? And so even if I don't sit down and play, but what does that feel like for you? Is that a tender place that you can go, Randy?
It is. It's just the outlet has to be different. And that's why the gathered believers is so important. So I even think about yesterday, we're taping this on a day. There's a moment where it could be one of the vocalists, it could be one of the instrumentalists, where they're actually representing me because I can't. Okay, I can't sing that note that they just nailed. I can't do that. I call it vamping. You probably call it a different, whatever the fill is in between. I can't hit that note. And so I get to see that worship and that excellence and be a tangential part of it.
It's almost worship vicariously.
It is, and it makes me grateful.
Yeah.
Because if you did just make me try to do that, it's not going to sound or look the same. It is still a holy moment. I can still worship. But the ability to say, I am so grateful to be here now, to be part of this, I would never have had that before.
Yeah.
So well done.
Yeah.
I just think there's something unique that happens to it's the merriment of our theological understanding of who God is and what he's done. And then like our heart's expression of gratefulness and thankfulness. It's like when you're singing theological truth, but you're not just singing it, you're truly meaning it.
Yeah.
It's a unique expression. Another thing I've heard is you don't leave the Sunday humming the message. There's something so true.
Hey, first of all, that's offensive.
No, the message is so important.
Yeah.
But in our daily lives, the things that are just going to come to mind are these songs that and so I have heard so many people who have been struggling, myself included, where a song comes to my head out of nowhere and it just ministers to me.
Yeah,
it's unique.
I can think of yesterday. Matt Mabry did a great job. But that line, with every prayer we prayed in desperation with him of heaven. Not every prayer that we have just locked into the throne of God. God, I'm believing, would you do this? Are you going to answer? But one day it will be. I can lock into that, right? So again, what you're saying is that those songs bury truth. And that's the reason we care about what we're singing.
Totally.
That really matters. That actually might be a third podcast. We could get there a little bit. So we've tried to set a stage here. It's important. And it doesn't matter if you can sing like Jesse or not. What God is doing among his people is really important.
You can say, or sing like Randy. I'm fine with that dichotomy. It's kind of, we talk about two ditches all the time.
Yeah.
I'm fine with the less talented.
Or the Mariah Carey liking Randy. I'm kidding. And that is much more me just picking at Randy than anything. But
we'll have a bonus podcast. Hold my microphone.
Wow.
So but I think it's true. I think because way more people in our congregation are like Randy than like Jesse or me. And so, but let's just say this, because the next point is, but that does not mean that you are not fully engaged, Randy.
Right.
And that we do not have the same commands of Scripture to engage in worship. It might mean that we shouldn't be on a mic or not, right?
Right.
But that's the next question. If this is an all skate, this is true for all people, then the next question I have is how do we get ourselves prepared? Because if we're going to all walk in, what happens between I wake up on Sunday morning to I sit in church on Sunday morning? If you're anything like me, you're distracted by the devil. The number of things that can go wrong, and you sit in and this first chord is hit and you're just ready to worship the Lord and it feels like everything's perfect. That's usually not true. So, man, help us, Jesse. How do we show up so that the downbeat on Sunday morning, our hearts are, tune my soul, or
Heart to
sing your grace. Tune my heart to sing your grace.
Yeah.
Like, walk me through that.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned this on the last podcast, but if you're expecting to come on the Sunday and just right away jump in, that's the only time you thought about God, about his goodness, about worshiping him, you've completely missed it.
Yeah.
I think it starts throughout your entire week.
Yeah.
Like if the only time you're thinking about the goodness and faithfulness of God is on a Sunday morning, that's just it's going to be a unfulfilling life, honestly, because we worship. I mean, God created singing. He created just our hearts to worship him for our good. It's a fulfilling thing. And so I think that's the first thing, is not just allowing Sunday to fill your cup.
Yeah.
Have it be a life of worship, one where you're seeing the sunset and you're declaring the greatness of God. You have an awesome conversation with your kid about the gospel and you celebrate that and thank God for that opportunity. It's a continual thing.
Yeah.
I think for me, like an example of that is my granddaddy, Tom Nesbitt. He's always worshing. I remember one time
front row, baby.
Yeah, that's right. He has motions and everything.
Yeah, he does.
He's walking in the light. No, but multiple times when we've been golfing together, like something would happen and he would just stop and thank God for it. So this time where a deer frolicked onto the green and then frolicked off and he's like, thank you, Jesus. Like, just like a sincere moment of just.
And if you know Tom, that's sincerity. There's not
And another time he was driving up to Madison. It's like a 4 or 5 hour drive. And I got sick of the drive because I made it so much. And I was like, how was the drive? Was it just, awful? He's like, oh, I had the best time of worship, just looking at all of like the hills and everything God's created. It's just like a gut punch, but in the best possible way. It's like, man, like that's how we should be living our lives.
And so what you're saying is the well for a song to come out is not a song. Like it's noticing the Lord, giving him honor and glory. It's not just a song. Right. But it's our heart's affection and our mind's attention on the things of God and actually verbalizing, oh, that's from God. That's a gift of God. That's the goodness of God. God, I'm thankful for that. And that's good news, Jesse, for the non-singer among us. Like, that's good news for the person who's listening going, man, I can't do what I've seen the people sing on Sunday morning. Like, that's okay. But noticing God and then showing up and bringing whatever you can bring is a really powerful thing. And for me, there's all sorts of hacks that way. Noticing God in creation. There's moments where I have to tune my heart with worship music, and I don't listen to worship music. The vast majority of the music I listen to is instrumentals while I'm working. Whatever mood I'm in, or whatever I'm doing, that's the kind of instrumental music behind me that's happening. But I consistently on Spotify, worship is my number one genre. And it's because I have to, outside of Sunday, remind myself of truth. That's not just a habit, it's a choice to go after the Lord. Randy, what about you? How do you?
Well, it's interesting as I hear you talk, I just, again, put it into my context, and I'm starting to see the the background of why we do certain things. Like something as simple as why do we close the doors when the service starts? It's so you can hear and be part of the music, right?
Yep.
Why do we have pre-music sometimes? To start getting you in that realm. All of it has, some more effective than others, a preparatory part of that.
Yeah.
And so I was just thinking practically, like, I'm not the we're hitting all my bad parts. I don't work out a lot. But if I were to tell Brent, here's your 3 exercises, go do them right now, you'd go do them. Because you've prepared, you've done it. If you ask me to do the same exercises, I'm going to have to get in the right position and figure out how to do it. So I also feel like when you walk into the service, and on average, I think the numbers, let's say 20 to 25 minutes of corporate worship together, give or take.
Yeah.
If I only get 10 of it, I'm not going to have the space to participate.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's going to take me longer to get in the song. It's going to take me longer to understand that new song because I've never seen the note sheet before and I don't know where I'm supposed to sing and man, that's not my key. And so if I'm jipping myself, I'm going to be just behind the curve always. And so that's why I think it's even more important for us to be part of that, even though we don't know, or at least for me, I don't know what I'm doing as much to prepare my heart to be part of that because then maybe I can start participating more.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I take that one step further even, like preparation starting, not even when you just get there, but it starts that morning when you wake up. What are you doing with your time? Obviously, like things
as you walk in, as you're thinking through it.
It's like, are you preparing yourself like to hear from God? Are you preparing your family to hear from God? Is it a crazy Sunday morning because you're just running late? And like that happens. I mean, that's going to happen. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of things we can do to just prepare ourselves to engage.
Music on the house. I mean, there's so many ways, but I think it's just a choice. Like, Lord, I'm going to show up ready. But let's transition a little bit because life is crazy. And any person in our church, week 1 of a month could be on a high, everything's going great. Week 3 of the month, it feels like everything's falling apart. And they walk into church honestly a little frustrated with God. They did get the diagnosis. Their kids are mad at them. Their spouse is mad at them. They're having to restart something like it's just been a bad week. And those are realities that I would say any given Sunday, 33% of our people are walking in just going blah. Okay. So how do we help people? What advice do you have for folks that are just like, I'm here, but my heart's not?
I think the worst thing you could do is fake it.
Come on.
So it's like, if you're feeling that way, to bring that legitimately to God and express that to him. Maybe it's during the first song. Maybe it's when you just sit down, get in your spot, finally you can take a breath. And you just say like, God, I'm not feeling it. I feel distant. Like, please use this time to refresh my soul. I think that coming before him honestly and not just like, well, I'm just going to like fake it. However, I do think like when we call ourselves to do what we should do, that God helps us as well. So it's like bringing ourselves to like to sing, to even sometimes I'll like raise my hand and almost just desperation. I'm like, God, I'm not feeling it. I want you. I want you to like speak to me. I want you to show me truth. I want to be changed by you.
Yeah. I think I said this in one of the prepare sermons I did. Bring every emotion to God, but don't leave until you have truth.
That's good.
Man, if you're ticked, if you're like, God, you failed me this week. Get that. I mean, say that. He can handle it. Go read the Psalms. Like, why have you forsaken me? Like, he can handle that. And so I think that the permission, like, hear your pastor say, you can be mad at God and he can handle it. And honestly, like, go read the Psalms. Like, David is frustrated with God in moments, but almost every time before that psalm ends, he comes right back around and says, yet I'm going to worship you. And so I think it's really a powerful thing to give people permission. It's like, yeah, this has been a horrible week, God. I got to get these tears out before I can worship. I got to get this frustration out. I got to, honestly, like the number of times that Karen and I have had a difficult week and we're in corporate worship and we just grab hands. And corporate worship environment is actually a very unifying place to remind us, oh, yeah, we're good. Like we're being petty. Let's keep moving forward.
Would this be helpful? Would you say do part of it. Here's what I'm thinking. You might not be feeling it, right? That's the course of the question.
Yeah.
Look at the words and let the words work on you. Listen to the music, even if you don't sing it. Listen to the music.
Yeah.
Pray during that time. Yeah. I'm thinking, do something.
Yes.
Even if you can't do everything.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. That's the second point. So you just jumped the second point. I'm giving space.
How dare you?
No, you're being wise. You're being wise because to sit in your anger or apathy or whatever for 30 minutes is when you have a heavenly Father who knows everything you need before you ask. That's dumb.
Yeah.
So I feel like, yes, be honest with the Lord, but also I think like this is actually what faith is. God, I don't see it, but I believe it. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the power move of worship. Yep. And I think that I could go off here and I might just. So oftentimes we look at other people, how they worship, and we're like, oh man, they must have it all together. I think people walk into a corporate environment and think, oh, the most holy, most spirit-filled, most don't struggle with sin, their kids are right, their job's perfect. They're the ones worshiping. My experience is absolutely the opposite. Personally, but also as watching people from the stage worship for so many years, I think that the people who know they need the grace of God the most are the most engaged. They do not think they've made it the most. They are aware of their need the most. And so their hands go up, not out of look at me, I got it together, but out of I need that. Or this is for me, when I'm having a hard time believing that's true, that's when I'm going to raise my hands. Because I'm having to preach the gospel to myself, remind myself of truth, because I've lived in a world of lies. I've lived in the worlds of insecurities or fears or whatever, all that. And we go to sing to the Lord, I can remind myself of what's true and what's good. I'm like, I need that. I need that.
Yeah, that's like the fuel for worship. It's like, I think that's a question I ask myself often, like, okay, why am I to worship?
Yes.
What is my fuel? Like, what should motivate me? And like, it's totally that. It's looking back and seeing the truth of the gospel and how that should impact my life and how it does. It's like every time I get to share the gospel with somebody, it like impacts me maybe even more than it impacts them. I feel like it just stirs my emotions, remembering the goodness of our God. And then secondly is like looking back at all the things that God has done to show that he's faithful and good. And like, to your point, like if all you can do is just like think about the words, it's like, use those words to help you remember that God is good.
Yeah.
If you don't feel it, know that he is. You know, like you're almost just like calling yourself to bless the Lord. You know, like please bless the Lord. You know.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell a story. Dennis Jernigan, old school worship leader. He hails from Oklahoma Baptist University, where I went to school, and he was kind of one of the fathers of the modern worship era. He wrote the song. My all in all, you are my strength when I am weak. So you are my all in all. So Dennis Jernigan has this story that he went to OBU and began to live out a homosexual lifestyle. And for many years did that. And God came and miraculously met him in that brokenness and helped him walk away from that lifestyle. And he began to lead worship and began to write songs. And in Oklahoma, he used to, like the first Friday of every month, he would lead worship, and you would have 1,000, 2,000 people there. Well, he had kind of moved from that kind of Baptist-y world to more of the charismatic world. But because of his Baptist roots, he really had, when he would throw a worship night, you would have like Baptist-y people, like I'm not going to move, and if I'm just going to sing, and then you would have like crazy charismatics, like, oh, okay. Like there's tambourines and flags, okay? And so all this was in one room on a worship night. And one night, almost every night before he would start off, he would just kind of set ground rules of worship. And he goes, there's so many different ways that people engage in this space. And he said, don't judge anyone. Here's what I found. The one who's been forgiven much worships much. Yeah. And don't you dare judge someone for how they worship, because you have no clue the freedom they found.
Oh, totally.
That's good.
And I think that is a little bit of corporate worship.
Yeah.
And in some senses, some people are radically aware of the freedom they found. And I think there's some old crusty Christians that forgotten the freedom that they have in the gospel. And to release the love and grace and forgiveness of the gospel in our lives, it changes the way we worship it on Sunday morning.
Mark Arendt, he shared a story when he taught about worship once, and it stuck with me. He was telling about how he was at this picnic. I think he was him, or he was telling the story about, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
He was at this picnic, and there's a few kids playing down by the water. There's like a beach down there, and the rest of the family was up just hanging out, picnicking.
Yeah.
And the kid wandered off into the water and like kept getting deeper and deeper. Eventually he got stuck. And so he was under the water. And then like eventually one of the adults saw the kid and like all they could see was his hands. They saw his hands sticking out of the water. And so they ran, they got the kid, pulled him out. It's like, oh my gosh, that was so scary. And then they asked the kid later, like, were you afraid that you were about to drown? And the kid's like, no. I just knew that if I raised my hands, my dad would come get me. So it's like in this like desperation, the story of like just he's like, no, I knew that if I raised my hands that my dad would come get me. And I remember Mark's point was like, it's not like you have to raise your hands in worship.
Totally.
But at the same time, like you could make a case that desperate people raise their hands in worship.
Yeah. And let's go to that point. So this is a postures thing. We have people from all walks and backgrounds, okay? So I'm sure there's people in our church that have been to the charismatic churches with tambourines and flags and all the stuff, okay? And then
Can I get a tambourine audition? Is that in play?
I will give you.
I've been trying to get you to do that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Man.
I'm in.
Cowbell. No, he said cowbell.
Cowbell.
Even better.
So there's people that are comfortable there. And then we have a lot of people that come from very liturgical. I mean, the number of people that I've come to that they're like, I grew up Catholic and this is offensive. Like people are raising their hands. How dare you? Like, so let's talk about postures because that happens in our church. But Jesse, this isn't like my personality. Every posture that you see at Keystone is biblical and even some instruction. So walk us through some of like how we should think about postures.
Yeah, this is again from Mark Arendt. It's something he shared with me.
You're gonna have to send this podcast to him now.
What a stud.
Yeah.
But he this one time, I think it was maybe the same talk. So it's like stuck with me. But he was talking about postures and worship, and he gave two Hebrew words that are throughout the entire Bible.
Yeah.
One of them was todah, and one of them was yada.
Yeah.
Todah, I wrote
Did
down.
not have those on my bingo card today.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
But they were just super helpful for me to like, as I thought about it myself, like, why is it that we raise hands? What's the importance? Like, because I know so many people personally that they're like, oh man, I feel weird doing it because I don't really know why I'm doing it.
Yep.
I know that I want to do it, but I don't know why.
Well, that's what I'm here for.
Not everybody fits up with
Hold my insecurity. I can help you through that. I mean, first time I rose my hand in a service was here at Keystone.
Yeah.
It was 849, and it was Man of Sorrow.
Yeah.
First time ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. You remember that.
I mean, I'm a tall dude, and then put my hands above my head.
And then people are going to look at you and
go with your sorry.
Yeah. So
for the record, that's a baller song. That's a banger. Oh man.
Yeah,
Good one to start with.
So Todah, it's used in like Psalm 50:14. It's just talking about like thanksgiving or praise, or this idea of extending your praise. It's like a way of confession.
Yeah.
It's like, or like if you want to receive something from the Lord, this idea of like receiving, like raising out your hands outstretched to Him. The other one that he said was not Yoda.
No.
Not Yoda, Yada, which is actually like to cast, to throw.
Yeah.
And so like you're casting your praise, you're throwing your praise. It's kind of like, the football, the hoorah, your team scores a touchdown and everyone, it's like you're casting your praise to the team. But in this case, you're casting your praise to Christ. You're saying, thank you, Jesus, for the blood. You're saying, praise you, thank you.
And I mean, all throughout the Psalms, bow down, shout,
bow down,
lift
shout.
up your hands. Like I think of Paul says, I desire that men would raise holy hands to the Lord in prayer.
Yeah.
Like I think it's 2 Timothy. Nope,
right.
I was looking for the fact check. I'm pretty sure it's 2 Timothy. All throughout the scriptures, these are not American things. These are biblical things to bow down. I mean, and let's get off of Sunday morning. Oftentimes, if I'm distracted in my prayers and I can't focus, I'll just get on my knees in the morning. I feel insecure, but oftentimes I'll have my AirPods in the morning, and we'll be worshiping, and I'll lift my hands in worship. It's not a corporate thing. It's just a matter of like, God, I'm overwhelmed with your goodness. I'm trying to incorporate those in my life because it is a good practice to just get out of your head and into your body. Just a good practice. Like, it's very helpful. Like,
so let me speak into that. It gets easier. So like my first time ever wasn't actually hands over head. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
It was palms up.
Yeah.
Hands to the side.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, now let me hear this. This isn't like a rule book, instruction book. I'm just telling you how I entered into it.
I think it's super helpful.
In steps because I got comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And then once you're comfortable with it, you went, oh, this is how I can utilize that.
Yeah.
Just like everything else. I mean, if you say, hey, kneel before a prayer, you probably wouldn't get that much pushback. It's kind of almost corporately understood better, just a normal posture. So it's just comfort in culture of where you get there, let alone hands over. So there's various ways.
So, I mean, let's just go back to the beginning. Like I grew up singing out of the hymn book, and I could sing the tenor line on any hymn you throw my way, my dude. Like I got you. But I remember the first time what I would say that I aligned my mind's attention and my heart's affection to the Lord and was overwhelmed by his goodness through song. And it was a simple chorus. From the rising of the sun to the setting down of the same, the name of the Lord shall be praised.
So
and I remember becoming overwhelmed with that song. I remember going to college because I kind of grew up in fundamentalist type of background, and people were raising their hand. I was like, I'd be kicked out of my church. That was legit my first thought.
Wow.
I would be like, I don't think they'd kick me out of the church.
There'd have been a discussion.
But I would have been the talk of the church. And so I remember being led in worship. This is before he was who he is. But Chris Tomlin playing Shout to the Lord. This is when Shout to the Lord was fresh.
Wow.
At OBU, and people raising their hands, and I wanted to so bad, but I thought I was doing something against God because it was not my culture. And so I think it's helpful for you to say that, Randy, because there is some nuance, some mystique around it that I think is like, hey, go read the Bible. Like, he's telling people to raise their holy hands in prayer. It's going to be okay. Like and it's not like he's going to get you if you don't, but it's an invitation to be engaged with your body and not just your mind.
It makes the worship experience richer.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not saying you can't have it without it. It's better.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. I think too, like, obviously the physical expression is important, but I think even our emotional expression, like where we allow ourselves to go, like emotionally, like we can stop the work that God's trying to do in our hearts. Like if you're trying to tear up, you're like, I don't want to cry in front of people, or I'm like, I'm not gonna think about that anymore, because if I think about that, I get like too emotional. I go too far.
Becomes uncomfortable.
Just kind of like.
But here's what I would say, Jesse, is we would think, I don't want to let myself go there. I would say, don't quench the Spirit.
Yeah.
Because you cannot, the Spirit does not work outside of who we are in our body. And God uses our emotions. Could we abuse our emotions and be manipulated? Sure. I don't see a lot of manipulation of emotions at Keystone. I'm just trying to tell you, if you're becoming emotional, listen.
Right.
Don't you dare be like, I don't want to deal with this or whatever. Like, if God is working, like, since that is a work of the Spirit, and don't ignore it.
I think that's a good point that I think would be helpful to some people. Because I've heard this criticism before, and Jesse, you can speak into this. Sorry to jump in. Please. There is not one moment in Keystone planning where there is focus on how to manipulate that emotion.
No.
There is 100% focus of how to, the spoken word, through the preaching, through prayer, through the worship, to focus on what we want to give to God that day.
Yeah.
That's the entire focus. I think it's good just to remind our people as the team works on stuff, they're looking at, hey, I remember that verse and it matches Brent. You're going to preach out of this verse. And what a great communion, for a lack of a word, of how they come together so that we can worship together.
The irony is most of the time, like we try our best to do that.
Yeah.
But half the time it just happens because I think God made it happen. 100%. Because it's like we definitely did not plan that to be as good.
But he used the moment.
Yeah, and you're like, you just kind of just step back and be like, that was a God thing, to be honest.
Yes,
like
1,000,000%.
No matter how much planning we can put into it.
Yeah, because let's be honest, the worship leaders are beholden to the pastor. And there
is a connection there, which we will speak of.
I lived in your world and I've lived in my world. And I'm sorry, Jesse. So
do songs get cut? Yes. It's time preaching it, not so much.
Yeah. Let's move on. We're moving on. So let's talk about something else, because I think this is helpful. Not every song, not every genre, not every style is everybody's cup of tea. There's people who would just assume the electric guitar not be there. There's people that when we sing an upbeat song, they're dialed in. There's people of like, well, if Keystone would just sing more hymns. I literally had a guy who was visiting Keystone when he was like, Brent, I know you guys got to build a lot of buildings. He goes, I think you should start singing more hymns because you'll get more old people in here and they'll build the buildings for you. And I said, I don't want buildings that much. By the way, I'm a hymns guy.
Yeah.
That's not about hymns. It's about, we're not going to cater to like preferences, but preferences are real.
Right, totally.
There are songs that we do that I'm like, and then there's songs I'm like, can we sing that every week? And so, my brother-in-law was a worship pastor and this is what we said. Some people want Burger King and some people want McDonald's. Like,
it's true.
At some level, some of this is a preferential thing, but walk me through that. Like, we're not, let's ignore the theology, okay? The theology in the songs.
Yeah, they're all good.
They're all good, okay?
They've all been vetted.
They've all been vetted. There's a process. The elders, a representative for the elder looks at every song. So we care about that. Well, let's talk about, I just wish that we sang more this, or I just wish that we sang more. Because in some senses, that's just an honest reality. But how do we deal with that when we have a big body and we're going in a vision of a church?
Yeah, 100%. I think like preferences, they're real and they're not bad or good. Yep. They're just what they are. And so I think just being aware that other people have different preferences than you. Because just like you, not every song that we do here, and I'm the worship director, not every song am I like, oh man, I love that song. This is so good. But that's not the point. The point is that we're thinking rightly about who God is, and we're proclaiming that in song. And so the question is like, is God worthy of our worship, regardless if you like the song or not?
Yeah.
So it's like, obviously the answer is yes. And so whether or not that song speaks to you personally, I think that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that we collectively as a church, literally with one voice, corporately are lifting up the truths of God together. And some of those songs are going to be ones that you love, and some are going to be ones that you just, don't love. And that's okay.
I'll give you an example. You just said that some of the songs that I love we're not doing. I just looked at my podcast, my fresh playlist. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 songs there. We sing one of them at Keystone. And I am 0% offended by that. Because
we don't have a banjo on stage, so it was...
No, none of those are banjos. For the record, have I led worship with a banjo?
Yes, you have.
Yes, I have. So don't you come at me, Randy Woodbury. Actually, I haven't. I just lied on a podcast.
That's okay. We can.
I played the mandolin and gave the banjo to somebody else, but
close enough.
I've led worship with banjo, ukulele.
Judges riddle, close enough.
Okay.
Bluegrass worship.
That was like 15 years ago, so I took a lot of comeback. But my point is exactly what you said. Like, this isn't about Jesse's favorite songs or Luke's favorite songs or Pastor Brent's favorite songs. Like, that's not what we're trying to get songs. And what people might not know is you have a master spreadsheet that's saying, is this more vertical up adoration songs? Like, walk people through that. How we're trying to balance a balanced diet of worship.
Yeah, totally. So when I first got here, I mean, first of all, every church has their own songbook. Songs that they do, it's going to be different. There's going to be people that come in to Keystone, don't know any song.
Yeah.
There's going to be some people who come from maybe a church that does music like this, and so they know more songs. So, like, what I wanted to do is just collectively put all the songs in a spreadsheet, kind of label what they are. And so some of those things that you can label a song with is the song vertical or horizontal, which is what you're going after.
Yeah.
So,
explain that really quickly.
Yeah, so horizontal worship would be like you're singing it to each other.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a song.
It's encourage one another.
You and I were made to worship you. And so you're singing to each other.
Yep.
And then the vertical songs are it's mostly
Holy,
adoration.
holy, holy.
It's like, you are good, you are glorious. We're singing it to God.
Yeah.
Some songs switch in between
Yeah.
as they're going. And neither are like wrong or bad, but I think it's important for us to have like songs that kind of do both things. Me personally, I love the vertical song probably more. And then there's even like a category of like God-centered versus man-centered. Again, not like saying we're worshiping man, but like our truths about who we are, like our dependence, our need for confession.
Yeah. So same God, we just, oh God, my God, I need you.
Yeah.
That's like, it's not that that's all about me,
Right.
but I'm the subject of that verse, of that line, versus God, you are good.
Right. It's man-centered,
Yeah. So, but that's
vertical.
That's vertical, right?
Yeah.
So one is God, you are good. That's very God-centered. God, I need you is very man-centered.
Right.
And we want a balance in that.
Totally.
And so I think you need to hear us saying is like, sometimes it's not about the preference. It's about the content of the song and where it leads us as a church. And honestly, having done this for a long time, like, the style of the church has radically changed over 20 years, man. Back in the day, like, it's changed. Like we were talking the other day, like almost every worship song is in a 20 beats per minute range. Like there's very few really slow songs, there are very few fast songs anymore. They're all right in a sweet spot that's dialed in. And so the modern world is less diverse maybe in some senses. I don't know. But
here's a good reminder too, because we've said this publicly. We are a next generation church.
Yeah.
You're going to see us, for lack of a better word, push things because that seems so negative.
Yeah.
But we're going to continuously ask ourselves the question, the people that are coming in, what can we do to make sure we're looking at the balance? And again, another word that sometimes takes a hit, they say, oh, you're just doing balance for balance sake. And you're saying, no, because people can enter into worship differently. Yeah. Some do it better by straight adoration. Yeah. Some do it better like, oh, you're right. This is what God says about me and my situation.
Yeah.
And so we're doing yes and. And so that's why I think sometimes there seems to be, oh, there must be a grand scheme behind it. No, we're trying to help everyone in the room worship God.
Yeah, I'll say this. This is be one of my teachings is when I was a worship guy, and I think it's really true, is that most of us prefer the worship that we experienced when Jesus fully got our heart. So if you're 40 years old and the height of your walking with Jesus was in your 20s, I'm guessing that those are the songs you want to sing, or the style, or the substance of those songs are what you want to sing. And it's certainly, back in the old worship world, when there was a big change from hymns to modern worship music, that was the big fight of like, and for right reasons.
Wars.
Yeah, for right reasons, the older saints are like, we want to sing the hymns. And you're like, if you look pound for pound, there's no difference in the way that they're like the lyrics, no music.
Right.
Pound for pound, they're pretty similar.
Right.
But that's where God captured your heart, and that's your, and this is the hack. This is the hack. Always stay at the high point of your Christian walk. Like Tom Nesbitt. That dude isn't looking back and go, when I was in my 50s and I was walking with Jesus. That dude's 86 now.
Yeah, sounds right.
Yep. And he's still pressing in. I think that's the challenge of be so chasing God that these songs are the fuel for you today.
Yeah.
Instead of back when I met God, back when he changed my life. Let him be changing your life today. And I promise you the songs we sing, because they're powerful, they're gospel-centered, they're biblically fueled, like they'll get inside your soul and grow.
Can I tell you a minor story quick? Because I was involved, a pastor that was influential in my early college life. The church was going through a debate about putting drums on the stage.
Yeah.
And he was putting drums on the stage, and someone asked him finally at one point, he kind of assumed it, he said, so you like drums on the stage? He says, no, I really don't like them. I'd prefer not to have them. I said, well, why are you doing it? He says, because I know how to worship with them or without them.
Yes.
But I know that other people will worship with them.
Yeah.
That was formative to me to help realize something that people thought was a pretty stark line in the sand was actually not a preference of his.
Yeah.
But he knew what we were trying to achieve.
I love it. I love it. Well, we could keep talking on and on and on. But I think that we'll close here. There's a value at Keystone. We expect God among us. Mm-hmm. And that is a gospel truth. Like, we are not alone. Like, the Lord is with us. He indwells in us. That he inhabits the praise of his people. Where 2 or 3 gathered, there I am with them. Mm-hmm. Like, we have good gospel ground to say God's going to be with us. And there is something really powerful when the body of Christ lifts our voice together, opens our ears to his word. And I think Keystone, closing this out is, are you expecting to meet God on Sunday morning? Everything we're talking about right now is for you to get your imagination and the preparation of your heart to walk in on a Sunday morning, go drop your kids off, go get a coffee, find your seat, and expect to meet God. And bring your doubts, bring your fears, bring your joys, listen to his instruction. And Jesse, as we do that, you and your team will lead us masterfully. Mm-hmm. And you do it at such a, beyond, let's talk about 2 ways you do it masterfully. Number one is at a pastoral level. You give us songs in the hymn book that is really good and the structure to do that, and you build it all well. But you also technically pull it off at some of the highest levels I've ever seen. So the teams at Keystone, the musicality is outrageous. And that's not for show, Keystone. So that's when you come in with your heart of, we expect God to be among us. There's no distraction for you. There's all joy for you to be pointed to the Lord and to seek him and worship him with everything you are.
So good. Well said.
Yeah, I think additionally to that, I think, if there's ever a question in anybody's mind, the people on the music team, their heart are just they love worship.
Yeah.
They love God. It's a sincere thing. And that's something we push for.
Oh, yeah.
There's always that tension, that push, that pull of we want to do things really well, but not for our own glory, for God's glory and him alone. And so it's so fun to be part of a team that really embodies that and get to lead a team that just loves Jesus more than they love.
It's so true.
Even getting to sing in a mic on stage.
And just to talk that up a little bit, 90% of the people on stage volunteers.
Yeah.
Are sacrificing their time for not a rehearsal earlier in the week, but they're there 6:37 on Sunday while we're still trying to get ready.
Yeah. I mean, so they had
sacrifice of time,
an hour and a half rehearsal Tuesday night, 2-hour rehearsal.
Mm-hmm. Yep, hour and a half.
And you have to show up with that rehearsal with your chops down. Mm-hmm. That's not a time to figure out your parts. That's a time to put the parts together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Come up Sunday morning, what time?
7:15.
7:15. They get out of here whenever it's
11,
done.
12.
Yeah. So they have one of the highest per capita hour serving jobs.
And they love it. And it's
joy.
It's so fun to lead this team. Yeah.
I know. Well, Jesse, we're so thankful for you. And it's our hope that we would expect God among us, that we would come in seeking him. And thanks for providing the environment we can do it. Thanks so much for being a part of our conversation today. If you'd like to know more about Keystone in general, hear sermons, or listen to more conversations, please visit keystonelife.com. Until next time, let's keep the conversation going.